Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan show. Thanks for joining the conversation.
Hello, everyone. Here we are in a car. We're doing carpool podcasting with Dr. Mark Cheng, I guess.
The rickshaw recording.
We figured we would maximize our time on the roads of LA, which for those of you who've ever been here knows it's a lot of waiting, it's a lot of traffic, it's a lot of stoplights. I mean, I see like 5 ahead of me and we're at a red light now. So we figured, why not? Let's take advantage of the time we have.
Definitely.
And we even got a special guest that might pop in every now and again. There he is. Anyways, always a pleasure to be in the presence of my pal, my very good friend, Mark, and so many things to say. But lately we have been driving around the city in my very, very brief, but like jam-packed kind of schedule with going between my long haul over to Australia, and I said I have to stop in and visit with you and eat. Obviously there's a lot of eating involved.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've been fairly conservative as far as that goes. I don't think we've actually really maximized that whole experience because on this particular leg of the journey, we haven't made our pilgrimage to see the barbecue Sifu.
That's true. Barbecue
Chef
seafood.
Adam Perry Lang.
There it is. Because last time, as my viewers may have seen online, it was no joke. We kind of came, conquered, ate all. It was, I can't even think about it right now because it's going to make my mouth water. But, you know, if we're lucky, maybe on the way back we'll get a sample. But being that we are here in Los Angeles, I really have been enjoying just kind of spending time, quality time with Mark, and he's driving us around. So super grateful for that. Oscar's super grateful because he doesn't like driving in Los Angeles. Who does? But one of the things I wanted to just kind of jump right into is last time we were here, I had the distinct honor of recording at the Inosanto Academy with your very good friend and Kung Fu family member, Marshall family member of Jeff Amata. And this time I was so grateful because we were able to stop in at the end of the evening and we got to meet Guru Inosanto, which was such a distinct honor. But I was blown away by the entire experience because it was like 9:35 at night and he was there teaching a class, finishing up his classes. And I mean, the man is such an inspiration.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing to imagine that a dude who's accomplished as much as he is, and so much stuff that like he has done, how many doors he's opened up and uncredited. Like as much as people think they know the story, regardless of how many biographies of him they've read, the best that they're going to get is like 50% of the story. Because there's so much stuff that he's done that's off the record that is just insane.
Yeah.
You know, he's on a Tuesday night, which last night was Tuesday, like usually up until recently, he'd be teaching the 5 p.m. kids class, 6 p.m. Thai boxing class, 7 p.m. Silat class, 8 p.m. Kali class, and then from 9 until 10:30, he'd be teaching the advanced JKD or JKD level 3 class. And it's only recently, very recently, that curtailed the JKD. He decided to curtail the JKD 3 class and then extend the Kali class a little bit longer. So, I mean, this is a guy who, has that level of output on a regular basis. And then God knows too, like, I mean, during the day, most weekdays when he's in town, he's doing some sort of training on his own. Like he's either taking a private with somebody else or he's getting treatment. So there's some sort of stimulus, there's some sort of learning. Like, right around the corner from here. We're right now, for our viewers, we're pretty much on the corner of La Cienega Boulevard and Wilshire. And like a couple of blocks that away, meaning to the west, is the shared studio of Martin Wheeler of Sistema and Higan Machado of the Machado family of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And, Guru has trained with both of them. So like on an quote unquote, off day, or off morning, he may be over at their academy, or one of them may be over at the Inosanto Academy. So, like, Guru is the kind of guy where, like, even on his quote unquote days off, he's still learning. There's still stimulus. There's still some sort of like fascination with getting better insights into the process. So this is a guy who, like, even outside of his class teaching schedule, he's still on. It's just really incredible.
It was so incredible because I teasingly said to him, I'm like, it's like my bedtime and you're here teaching classes. It makes me feel a little bit inadequate. But beyond the obvious, which he is such an inspiration in terms of being, a martial arts master, but a mentor, teacher, practitioner, all of those things. What really struck me was his kindness and sincerity and just openness, and just being able to just meet him for a few minutes and seeing him interact with his students right after the class, and how just open he was with them, and the energy that I was privileged to be in the presence of was super exhilarating. And I know that having visited many a martial arts school and seen many a classes and seen many people interact with their students, and because I consider him at such a high caliber of someone who's dedicated their entire life, and having, of course, my father as my inspiration and someone I look up to, and in his 80s, and they are pretty much in that same generation, and kind of knowing the dedication it takes, but just his kindness and humility, and that was really what kind of struck me, and really made me feel all sorts of tender gooiness inside. But I felt so privileged, and he was just so kind and warm and welcoming, and I was really, really grateful for that experience. So thank you so much.
I'm glad we could finally make it happen. I mean, last time we wanted to, get you and Guru together, just so you could meet him. But this time, luckily, we just, we were having dinner in the neighborhood, and then looked at the time, and then, it's just at the tail end of classes. Maybe we can stop by and say a quick hi.
And
it worked out perfectly.
And this is the thing. It wasn't just him. It was like that extension of kindness and warmth was everybody that we got the honor of meeting as well. Like, everybody welcomed you in. It was like, of course we were there with you, so that probably helps because you're family, and they're like, well, all right, Mark wouldn't be bringing some randos into the school. But it was still really nice to see. And like I said, just kind of sitting back at the end before we even were introduced and just kind of watching the interaction was really great. I mean, and Oscar was there too, and he's seen a lot of classes, so I know that he was honestly just, I don't know, Oscar, you were pretty amazed he was awake, because we were fading pretty quick.
How does a man who's in his late 80s have that much energy coursing through him? I don't know, because we were falling asleep.
We were. I mean,
but
granted,
actually,
we had just eaten a lot of food.
But when we got there, we were energized by the vibe from the class. I think you said something like, you could tell that everyone who did that class really enjoyed the experience they just had. So that was really cool.
Yeah, super, super cool. So thank you for that, Mark. And I wanted to just kind of chit chat with you about this on our carpool podcast on the way home, about that generation, because it is a rare breed of humans. And I mean, as I think through my father's generation, and I feel so sad because they never really got to cross paths, being on the East and the West Coast, and never really being in the same circles. I don't think they have really interacted in a way of which I would have loved them to, like, throughout their careers. But
what's crazy is that, like, thinking back, right, on how many times the two of them probably shared an issue of Inside Kung Fu magazine.
Oh, that for sure.
Right?
Yes,
like,
yes.
I know without a doubt that if we
Yes.
crack open an issue, there's got to be some issues where, like, your dad's on the cover or Guru's on the cover or whatever.
Yeah.
Or they're both in the same issue. But, the fact that they've never been able to hang, they've never been able to talk and vibe, it speaks to, at once, how small of a world it is, and how still, like, people get to, can end up missing each other.
Yeah.
But, like, your dad, Guru has said that, when he saw pictures of your dad up on the plum blossom posts, on the jongs, and, you said until very recently, he just did a pic.
Yeah, just to
a
get
shot
up there and do a
for Jim
stance.
Lee, right?
Yes, yes.
And then jumped down. It's an 8-foot drop. And then, like, on his own, like, most of us that are quote unquote healthy in our joints, to be able to tolerate an 8-foot jump, never mind to do it with the kind of confidence, mastery, control, ability that your dad has in his 80s, is pretty epic.
Well, okay, to be clear, like he did that, I think in his 70s at 8 foot. I think this was maybe like 3 to 4, but he's still jumping off the staircases, doing these things. But what I was thinking about was some of these older generation masters, and how it's been very sad to see and watch and feel that generation kind of, passing on and slipping away. And is there lineage that people who are going to carry the torch and keep that going? And when I was at the school, it was really exciting to see so many seniors and so many people that kept that energy alive. But I think about a lot of my father's friends, like there's this photo from the 70s of all these masters, from Bosun Mark to everybody on the East Coast that was kind of there in this kind of like a Chinese Kung Fu Federation. And my dad, even just a few years ago, opened that picture and was like, everyone here is gone, except for me and one or two other people. And then each year that changes. And I know it's whatever, the circle of life, it's an inevitability, but I think there's also something to be said, like the closing of a really huge chapter that we are kind of coming upon, where we've been alive through seeing a lot of these greats, right? Like Guru and my father and some of the others that either they're not even teaching anymore or they have passed away. But like it's a little bit scary to me, because I'm in this position where, of course, I've committed myself, but I look around and I wonder, like, what does that mean for not just traditional martial arts, but kind of that where we had this source, and how much of that source has been preserved, and have we gotten all the information we could, and are we able to then make sure that there's others to carry that on, or are we relying on AI to just have overheard all our conversations, and maybe that there'll be some sort of robot in the future going, here were all the great grandmasters of the blank century.
I think it's we're in a weird time of societal change. Like, I had a conversation with my son, who's now 19, and this is a kid who's grown up. To be fair, he's grown up in my fairy tale of an upbringing in a lot of ways, because like his uncles, his aunties, the people that he's grown up around are like, martial arts royalty. Yeah. And so to him, there's a lot he takes for granted, but then there's also a lot that he's familiar with because of exposure. And I asked him, I said, hey, I got a question for you, just, as a societal type question, a society type question, culture type question. Do you think that like the majority of people your age have heard of Bruce Lee? Now, our age, our demographic, that question would be like, what are you, stupid? Of course. Right. And then he goes, yeah. And so the way he said yes was so hesitatingly. Right. And I was there like, wow. Like, and I go, can you name even one of his films? And he could, because we recently saw Enter the Dragon. Right. But like, in our, for our demographic, there's like, oh yeah, there's Fist of Fury, there's, Game of Death, there's all of these things. And I realized that, wow, like the term Bruce Lee to signify someone that's great in martial arts, for this generation, that's about the level of it. But for them to actually associate a face with the name and that sort of thing, it's not really there anymore. And so, like, when I think about Guru, and you've mentioned about like the passing on of that generation, like, man, how many people came for Bruce and stayed for Dan, which is the phrase that I've heard a few times. Okay. But like, when I think about like, wow, culture has really changed in the sense that like kids used to fantasize about having access to martial arts instruction. Right. And a lot still do, but because we live in the information age, because like as long as you've got a smartphone, you've got access to Instagram, or you've got access to YouTube, and you have some sort of visual media or visual resources that you have access to that we didn't before. And certainly our parents' generation didn't have before.
Of course.
Right? So for them, it's like you get one or two techniques, if you're lucky, and then you practice the hell out of those to the point where you can do those, upside down, inside out, underwater, sick, injured, whatever, and fail proof.
Yeah.
Whereas, for the generation now, they have access to umpteen zillion techniques of all different styles that back in the day, even when we were kids, like styles that didn't really communicate to each other.
Right.
And now they have open access. So I feel like it's almost like that seesaw, right? Like we didn't have access to that much information, right? But these kids have access to tons of information. So because we didn't have access and our parents didn't have access to that much information, we trained our asses off. And certainly our parents' generation trained their asses off.
Right.
So they had mad skill in a few things. Whereas kids these days have options. They have so many different options to choose from that we weren't necessarily aware of, but they don't have the same instant recall mastery or power, commitment, or confidence in those techniques. So yeah, I like thinking about how the guard is changing. Yeah, it's super sad to see that generation, like Richard Norton, the legendary Richard Norton just passed away, Australian martial arts icon, actually international martial arts icon. Because of all of what he'd achieved, and then his appearing in movies with Jackie Chan and everything else. But man, to see how martial arts as a field of human endeavor is changing has been really interesting.
Yeah, I sometimes get very guilty of being stuck in my own little bubble of the Wallum world, and I'm not as knowledgeable about what else is out there and who else is out there. And I've been better about trying to be more connected, but also it's just so overwhelming to be in the world that I'm already in.
Yeah.
But what I do notice is that you're right, the access to information in general, right, for all things, whether it even be sports and things like that, but does that then create the not even jack of all trades, master of none? But because I feel like for me, maybe because I'm such a traditionalist, and I feel like, yes, for someone like you who has such a great foundational skill, you can take a lot of styles and they can communicate with one another that makes sense. But I think when a lot of this newer generation kids, maybe who are online learners and they don't have a foundational access, or a good foundation, access to good foundation, then it creates, I don't want to use the word problem, but it creates kind of a just barely scratching the surface, very shallow understanding of their bodies, of whether it be application or whether it be the art side of things or the historical or philosophical side of things. Is there any depth to where they get a chance to be really enriched by XYZ style? Because I feel like even just being in the presence yesterday, seeing the history on the walls, seeing the impact of Guru, right? Or
Right.
if you go to the Wallam Temple, you can feel the history that's there.
Sure.
And it's I only want to do a little bit of this and whatever, and then I'll go to this and then I'll go to that. I feel like so much is missed. Not that you have to be just only absorbed in one thing and go all the way to the bottom of the well, but God, if you don't even look over the edge of the well and have any approach to it, is that even worthwhile? I don't know.
I think it can be. So
Yeah.
here's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah.
The biggest secret in any field of endeavor, but certainly in martial arts, is the one that is obvious and most overlooked, and that's hard work. Time spent putting in the work. We can have access to all the information in the world, but if we don't actually train the reps, if we don't actually put in the reps, if we don't actually do the stretching, do the stances,
Yes.
build the strength, all of that, fully, bitter practice, right? If we don't actually do that, then having access to one of the dopest traditional curriculums in the world, like Wallam, or having access to every other martial art under the sun via YouTube or, Patreon or whatever the platform is, or even in person, right?
Yeah.
I'll say for myself, right? For those of you guys who are viewers, I've said this countless times, and I will continue to say it till my last breath, as long as it rings true. I have some insane access to some of the most incredible martial arts people who are actively teaching me. Not I have access to hang out with them socially, access for them to be vested in guiding me well
Yeah.
in improving in my abilities in their system. But like if I don't actually have the time or the energy to put in the reps, or I don't have the bandwidth to put in the reps, that knowledge doesn't impart to me, even though I may have been exposed to it, because I don't embody it anymore. Like I've never embodied it. So whether it's training Shotokan with Tsutomu Oshima, whether it's training combat Soijiao with James Lin, whether it's training Sistema with Martin Wheeler, whether it's Jiu-Jitsu with Roy Harris, whether it's Kali, Jeet-Kune-Do, Silat with Guru Dan and Asano, like it's putting in the time and the effort. And so like even if we're in kids these days that are exposed to so many different styles, like Taekwondo, Judo, this, that, or the other, right? Like to me, these are languages of movement. And so just like some people would say that in terms of linguistics, spoken linguistics, you need to have a mastery in one language so that you can then have your thought patterns ingrained and then you can learn other languages. I don't agree with that. I think just like kids who grow up like in Southeast Asia or in Switzerland where they're exposed to multiple languages at one time, our brains can understand redundancy. Just like, we were joking about yesterday how my kids have like 5 different nicknames, right? Like it's no mystery like when one of those nicknames is called who's being spoken to, right? Mm-hmm. So as long as we understand that there's a particular intent behind a stimulus, we learn to recognize that and react accordingly. Mm-hmm. But if we're expecting a really parochial stimulus, everything outside of that we don't necessarily react to the same way.
I feel like everything you said, of course, holds true, and maybe Oscar, you could articulate for me what I'm kind of thinking because I think but I feel like you are also a little bit of an exception to the rule in your discipline to do such things, because I don't actually see a lot of others that are as successful at the code switching as you are. And I know it's because like we're talking about like having that foundation, and I know you think, well, like this kick is this kick to this kick, and across the board you can kind of code switch and make it work. But I feel like the fact that a lot of our younger generations, and like let's kind of define that, maybe 25 and under or something like that, they're so distracted already. I have trouble getting my students to focus on the one thing. Like, and I can't imagine them going, oh, well, I'm in 8 other martial arts, or I'm in 8 other dance things plus this. And like our capacity is already so limited, and the level of distraction is so high that even I, as someone who's done this my entire life, I mean, I'm still digging to try to get to the bottom of the well and like how much deeper can I go? But I think it's also how I've been inherently trained, which is to really go deep, go deep, go deep. And because my style has so much for me to try to master, and I have a different burden, or
right,
I have a different mission than most people, so my understanding has to be at such a level, and I don't think that holds true for everyone. I don't disagree that I think there is benefit to doing, say, even like at our school, Tai Chi and Kung Fu, like you get the yin and the yang.
Right.
But I just feel like the level of distraction, and Oscar, this is something you and I talk about all the time, which is, and you have exercise ADD, and you want to learn like all the things, and like, what is your take on kind of what we're discussing?
So I'm kind of maybe in between both of you because
literally, figuratively,
literally and figuratively.
Figuratively. Let's not go there with what we're thinking.
Oh no.
So what what I want to mention is there's a lot of science behind exposing kids to a lot of variety, right? And I think that speaks to a lot of what Mark said so eloquently. And there's another word that Mark used, which is super important, which you don't want to forget here, is the intention. What is your intention? Which is what we talk about all the time. Like, what is that you really want? So, to your point, Mimi, I do agree that we need a base foundation of something, whatever it can be. It could be the building blocks of ABCs. But I also feel there's a ton of value in exposing people as early as possible to many different things. And then at some point, teenager, young adult, my age in the 40s, you have to decide, well, what is it that I want to do with the rest of the time that I have? Do I want to try to be a dot connector, which I try to sometimes do with like fitness, and is like, let me just touch a little bit here, touch a little bit here. But my main focus is, of course, Wallam as well, like it is yours, um, uh, albeit a little bit more distractedly, right? Or do I want it to be? Is my intention to be super focused on this thing because that is your burden or your thing, or is my intention to let me expose myself to all of these different things because there's value in all of them? So I don't know if there's a wrong way for any of them. The only thing that's wrong is something that you and I talk about all the time, which is are the actions that you're doing supporting whatever your vision, goal, desire is, or your intention is? And as long as you know that, right? If you know this is the reason why I'm doing it, then do whatever the hell you want. But if you want to say, we were with a really good friend of Mark's, where he was looking at pictures of your dad doing these low stances. I was like, if you want to be able to do that, it's going to take a lot of work. If you want to get a taste of it and see how some things can work, that's another thing. So it's all about what do you want?
What is your intention?
What is your intention?
What are your intentions, Mark?
What are your intentions with my daughter? No, I'm just kidding.
Homie.
For the record.
All of the listeners are now going to be like,
What's
yo,
happening?
what's up with Dr. Cheng? No, dude.
No, not at all. Most upstanding guy right here next
Spoken
to me.
for, off the market, chill. Yeah, none of that, dude. Oscar's gonna throw random stuff out from left field, and then like people are gonna be in my DMs going like, "What are you doing there?"
He's just always randomly quoting movies in really weird times also, so we never really know what he's talking about. That does often happen. Yeah. Or like in 80s songs, he'll be teaching kids class and he starts quoting 80s songs and they all look at him like he's growing like another ear on his head or something. But anyway, what were you going to say?
So as far as what are my intentions as far as martial arts go, or what are my intentions in general with how I live my life, I think one of the things that I'm always looking for in terms of big picture is, does this add benefit to my life, and like in terms of adding to longevity?
Mm-hmm.
But the other question is like, does it allow me to do the same for other people? And the third thing is it sustainable? Like, does it benefit me? Does it allow me to benefit others better? And is it something that I can continue to do? Or is it something that like, okay, it benefits me for the short term, it can really benefit other people, but like it's going to burn me out?
Mm-hmm.
And then like trying to find that perfect imposition of the Venn diagram on that is a lot of what I think about. So with martial arts, right? Like when I was younger, it was like, yeah, I want to be able to fight. I want to be tough. I don't want to be bullied. I want to be able to, be strong and healthy.
Right.
And then over time, as I grew more experienced, and also too, because it's like, I don't want to, like even when I was in college, I remember thinking like, oh, I want to do these tournaments. I want to do this. I want to do that. And my mom was like, if you're going to do tournaments and stuff like that, you might get hurt. And that's fine. But if you get hurt, understand that like the time that you're hurt, you're not able to study as well. You're not able to do this and that as well. So it's like, what are you spending all that money in college for? And I was just like, oh, I didn't really have an answer. So we have to look at what our obligations are. Now, for me as a 50-something-year-old now with 2 nonagenarian parents that are under my care, two kids, and then 2 minor children, a significant other and a dog, like, yeah, it's a whole different set of obligations that weigh on me.
Yeah.
And, not being able to, if for whatever reason, let's say I'm in training and I focus so much on a certain aspect of training that maybe I gain insights, but those insights are costly physically to the point where like now I can't work as efficiently, or I can't earn as efficiently, or I can't recover as efficiently to be there, my best self, for my kids or for my parents or for whomever else. Then like, okay, is it really worth it? And I think a lot of us in the world of martial arts don't ask that question often enough.
Right.
So when it comes to intent, we got to be clear on like, okay, big picture. What is the big picture? Do I want to be the best fighter? And if so, why do you want to be the best fighter?
Right.
Or do you want to be the person who's best able to use martial arts to defend yourself in a pinch, Do you want to be the kind of person who can not only defend themselves in a pinch, but also like be healthier, so that, you know, when the rest of your demographic is suffering different aches and pains, you are not, and you are able to do X, Y, and Z that you were able to do in your teens. You know, do you want to be the kind of person that has studied ethics and morals from, you know, whatever source, you know, whatever culture, and have it enrich your life, be a better person, be someone that other people like look to as an example? Or do you just want to be a megalomaniac, someone that just rules over other people, like trying to hold sway and, you know, like, I have this rank and you have to do this and you have to do that, and be that kind of like, you know, for lack of a better word, dictator?
Yeah. What's interesting is you kind of laid out all these different paths and all these different goals and intents, and you know, it's really clear for me as well, I'm a practitioner, because my father is like, number one, to better yourself. He's all about health and clearly being able to move in your 80s and do things and not feel the pain when you wake up in the morning, and just have that, like you said, longevity. But I think it's more than longevity, is like quality of life as you age, right? That quality, whatever that means for you, whether it's because you still want to do the splits, or you still want to be able to just walk up the stairs without pain, pick up your grandkids off the ground, whatever those things are that create quality of life, I think are important for us to define for ourselves, because then that helps us lay out what the intent is. Like what does quality, like, you know, what does quality of life mean for you, or what are the things that are important? But I was thinking, as you started to name the things, and you got to, you know, the megalomaniacs, and then you've got the bullies, and you've got, like, it's interesting to me that regardless of era and time, and we are supposed to be smarter as time goes on, right? Like as a civilization, as humans, with all this technology and all of this information at our fingertips, you would think that those stereotypical types in a martial arts school, I mean, let's just like keep it to a small demographic, because we are martial artists and we're talking about this, but this could be the world, of course.
Sure.
But like in a martial arts school, it's like, wow, you still have the, you know, the crazy trainiac that's going to come to 12 classes a week and burn themselves out and go so die hard they injure themselves.
Sure.
Even with all the information we have on rest, recovery, and everything. And you've got the bullies, and you've got the big-headed, you know, my dad always says, you know, very conceited, no humility, no humble, no inner you know, control and patience. I mean, it's interesting that you could take, minus like the big hair of the 80s and the clothes, you could take any era and there's still always the respectful student and the diligent student and the dedicated student. It's like, even though information is so more readily available and we are supposed to evolve as a species, or maybe it's just not enough time. Has it not been thousands and millions of years and we haven't evolved enough? But I find it interesting now that you were laying that out, going, wow, it's up to us as the leaders then to create a culture in the school and an environment where we educate and bring everyone to the place that we feel is the right conduct or the right principles and things like that. But it's like, wow, we haven't really changed much as a species.
We don't.
We're not learning from our mistakes.
We do in some ways and we don't in a lot of others, because
Yeah.
like a lot of things are really about energy efficiency, right? Like, how would we drive the best evolution for our species or for our demographic or for our field of endeavor? And a lot of it revolves around having the energy to engage in difficult conversations. And that stuff can be insanely soul level draining, because those conversations are difficult, because like oftentimes they touch on the sore spots or the weak spots or the unstable spots in our own hearts. And so like that requires us to do a lot of deep, often uncomfortable introspection into topics that would be, you know, much easier to gloss over. And I'll just focus on my stretching, my kicks, and I'll hit the bag, and I'll, you know, lift these weights, and I'll swing this kettlebell, or, you know, I'll do this Guando form or whatever, or I'll, you know, fight in that tournament. Like, a lot of these things are great achievements, but when it comes to human evolution on a soul level, those other things are also distractions. So it's really easy to just say like, well, look, I did this, look, I did this, look, I
Right.
did this. And then like, list all of the stuff on your resume. But if you're not having those difficult conversations, especially with yourself, you know, it's you're hamstringing your development. And then I think also too, right? Like even the people that are capable of having those conversations, that have the language, the specificity of language for those difficult conversations, it's still draining.
Yeah.
To have those conversations with the student that like has bully instincts, or the parent that's like overbearing and like, you know, screaming and yelling at their kid from the sidelines, or the client that doesn't want to do the movement prep and would rather train injured, doing the same exercises that made them injured in the first place because they don't want to do the other exercises that you've been strongly encouraging them to do that would actually rehab them and everything else. So yeah, I mean, these are, you know, having the energy to engage in those things, having the willingness, having the energy, and then having the right tools in terms of like specific language that is engaging enough to be able to get through to such people. All of that is tough. All of that's tough, and that's a big demand. And I think most of us in an art, especially a movement art like martial arts, will focus on, okay, I learned the sequence of this form, I learned the sequence of that form, I learned all these exercises, I learned all these things. But like that's a different part of the brain to me than like I'm learning to be really introspective in the parts of myself that are dishonest, are weak, are, you know, cowardly, are making excuses, whatever the thing is, right? So it's like these are all considerations too.
Yeah, wow, that's a lot. I mean, I don't know. Oscar definitely has never met any client that doesn't want to do movement prep or things that further them from their current injuries. I know that he definitely doesn't.
They're all
know.
perfect. Okay, they're all perfect in their own little way, and that's what I do jokingly sometimes say is you guys are all just perfect. You're perfect in every way. I was like, now can we just do the things that we said we were going to do to help you achieve the goals you said you wanted?
Because sometimes that perfect is perfectly injured.
Yeah, exactly. But to something that, you know, what Mark was saying was making me think about this balance of yes, what's the main reason why we're doing this? And I think it is to become a better person, right? And then how do you define that? There's principles that are we can follow, but you know you have to define that for yourself. But something else that Mimi and I talk about also is this thing of, yes, you do need to spend time with yourself, be self-aware, understand all your emotions, but we're interacting with the world with a bunch of different people. So then ultimately, why are you doing it? You're doing it not just to better yourself, but to better yourself so that then you can be a better person out there who's interacting with other people.
A better brother,
sense.
A better
exactly
husband, a better father to your kids, a better friend,
yes.
a better, like, you know, a better workout partner, a better student to your teachers, like whatever
yes,
the thing is.
Absolutely.
Like everything that, or at least for me, right? Like when I was asked about earlier, what's your intent? Like what's your goal? What's your big picture goal? It's like if you put energy into something that doesn't increase your bandwidth or increase your ability to serve or help other people out, then why are you doing it?
Yeah, literally 2 weeks ago we were talking with my father, Oscar, and he said, I only want to help people. I'm always trying to stay healthy and teach people to be strong and help themselves, but I want to help people. I want to help make people better. And just like that principle that we kind of try to live by on a day-to-day basis and work towards. But it's funny because I realize now, even with, and maybe because of the over access to information and everything, it doesn't allow for a filter and for students, people, humans, whatever, to be able to draw the conclusions or be guided. And that is why I feel it is so important you have the right teacher, mentor, coach, Sifu, whatever your leader is in your organization, or whatever art or whatever activity you're doing. It is so important to have the right guidance, because they can be your filter. They can be the ones to take all the noise and all, I heard this, I read this, I saw this, I looked at this on YouTube. Someone told me this, my Kung Fu partner or friend or whatever told me this. And so to have that guidance is really important. And lately we've found when we pull our students just at the temple, one of the things that they want more of is the history and philosophy. And I thought, man, I'm so shocked. You're thinking, no, I want to learn how to break someone's arm and do combat, or I want to learn the application. And it's there. The interest is there. But it was shocking to us how much people are craving what they are not getting in their daily lives. And so we're kind of doing more active history lectures and sharing of some of the lineage and philosophy, but just the principles and just drawing it together on the past, the present, the future, and how what we're doing can make us better humans, to be a better person for yourself and for others. And it's fascinating to me that it feels inherent, like, oh, of course that makes complete sense. But we also, being at the temple for 45 years now, like, rarely have consistent history and philosophy lectures or times where we're able to give students a different aspect of the training that isn't, all right, here's how we block, here's how we kick, all right, chamber, tight fist, all this stuff, or just the workout. And I feel like we forget that we not only need to exercise our bodies, but we need to exercise our minds, because that part is the communication, the interaction, and our, emotional intelligence, and how we really are interacting in the world. Because the highest percentage of your interactions in the world isn't you showing off your physical skills or you kicking down the door. I mean, I don't know, maybe you kick down the doors wherever you go and you're like, I'm Mark Cheng, I'm here, I'm Dr. Mark Cheng, and I'm here.
I love Rick James. No.
Rick James. Unity. But basically, yeah, it's like, wow, all the things that we actually do need to continuously train ourselves for, I feel like that exercise is not being done.
So, interesting point that popped into my head while I was listening to you say those things. A good friend of mine, Jason Ferrugia. I think, Oscar, you're familiar with Jason's work. Yes.
Very muscular.
Very muscular, very hard, exceedingly hardworking, and
smart trainer.
very smart and driven. He and I are very dear friends. He's like a brother to me. And he told me one time, he goes, dude, in your social media, you really need to just take at least 5 concepts that are most important to you and just hammer the shit out of those 5 concepts. And I thought, dude, 5 concepts, it's going to get so dry. Like really? Just 5 concepts and repeat that over and over and over again? And then I thought about it, and I heard it from a different friend of mine. And he goes, dude, you know why people go to church every Sunday? Some people go to church every Sunday for years and years and years and years and years. And I go, habit? And he goes, there are some that definitely get it out of habit, but then there are a lot of people that will go to church. There's a fair number of people that will go to church every Sunday for years and years, and it's like they get something from every mass, every sermon, every whatever, right? And is it like the Bible's being rewritten every Sunday? Or, is every year the new edition of the Bible coming out? And he goes, no. He goes, think about this. The human brain doesn't have that kind of a perfect attention span, so that it's like you can hear the same stories over and over, but like you're not the same person listening to the exact same story a year later or a season later. And so like you're at a different level of evolution to be able to listen to that story and gain something new from it if you're open-minded and open-hearted to it.
Yeah.
And he goes, and the person delivering the sermon, the priest may be a same priest, different priest, whatever, but he's in a different spot too. And so like when you hear that, it's like, it seems like it's the same old content, but the listener's different, the speaker's different, the energy's different, the interaction's different, therefore the chance of breakthroughs are different. So even though we may be working on the same boring stuff, it's like, to be able to speak on stuff like history, it's rich, man. I mean, like, Guru talks about, we've told Guru about this before. And in his Kali, there are 12 areas of concentration. And one of the areas of concentration is like history, healing, religion, stuff like that. Things like that, mystical stuff. But for him, a lot of that, as far as in class, he doesn't touch it on any of the religious stuff, doesn't touch on any of the healing stuff, doesn't touch on any of the mystical stuff, but he will talk about history. And what's really fascinating to me is, having observed his classes for, a couple decades now, when he's demonstrating a physical technique, oftentimes you'll see people fidgeting, right? Like they're trying to emulate it, or they're trying to do this or that, or their body's just like a little, restless.
Right.
When he's laying out history, like really talking about, okay, this is what it was like when I trained with so-and-so, and this is what he told me. Here are the things that he told me that, may or may not have to do with combat, but are definitely historical in background. The room gets very still. It's very cool how that works. And people it's like a rapt audience. So I think there's a lot to be said for how much we evolve as we listen to these stories, because at the beginning it could be just memorizing facts, like, okay, the guys that did Doce Pares were these 12 guys and blah 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 blah, and they were in this part of the Visayas and whatever, right? Great. And then over time, as you listen, you have more background information, therefore you appreciate the story in a different way, and then you're like, oh my god, there are different dots that we connect, not just in a planar fashion, but in a 3D fashion.
Yeah. I love this because on so many levels, this is why teachers exist, to repeat themselves basically, but it's important because you're right. How many times, Oscar, have people said, oh, do this when you're doing your form, or do this, technique the certain way, and then you walk away and a different teacher gets up and says pretty much almost exactly the same thing, and the student's like, oh, no one ever told me that, and then you just want to like lose your mind. You're like, really? You've never told to breathe in and breathe out? Really? You've never been told? But I think this is where you said, Mark, like, as a human species, we kind of have to be ready to receive the input. We have to be in the right state of mind, the right time, the right place, there's just a lot of things that have to align for us to finally absorb the message and to get it. And even then, Oscar and I talk about this all the time, there are certain classics in terms of books. Mm-hmm. For us too, Oscar and I consider a lot of movies classics, but like, you watch them at different times of your life, or you read these books at different times of your life, and it hits so differently because you've lived, you've experienced. We just spoke about it the other day, actually, with and we were like, yeah, Dan John's a really good friend of mine. We have been dissecting The Sword and the Stone together. And because of him, I've read it so many times now. And every time you get something different from the story, from the lesson, from the philosophy, from the whatever the, messaging is. And because you've lived, and through your experiences and where you're at in your life, you are receiving information differently all the time, even if it's the exact same information. So I find it fascinating, but I love that we're kind of talking about this, because as teachers, can get very frustrated because we feel like we're repeating ourselves. Does this mean no one's listening? Does this mean why do I even do this if you're just like hitting the wall over and over? And I will say, I kiddingly always say things like, well, when you're a teacher, it takes like 20 years before, that one student comes back and lets you know, hey, by the way, I really appreciate you. This one thing in class, like, changed the dynamic of my life and the trajectory. And you have to wait 20 years before you feel gratitude as an instructor, which is completely untrue, of course. But it is true that sometimes people won't even realize a lesson they've learned until they look back several decades.
Totally. And I think, part of the tough thing is that as instructors, we're impatient, we're immature. We want to see like an immediate light bulb click on and then see a massive transformation in the people that we work with. But, like you mentioned too, right? Like, you have an assistant instructor or even a senior classmate or even a same level classmate say the exact same words. At least it sounds the exact same words that you've said. And because it's coming out of a different mouth, all of a sudden it clicks for that student. And it's like, dude, were you not listening all of these years when I've been saying that shit? And so, like, it's very easy to become, like, married to the power of the messenger. Yes. Rather than respecting the message itself. It'll be digested and received at different times and in different ways based on the recipient. So sometimes someone doesn't get our message because, not because there's a fault of the messenger, not because of the fault of the message, and maybe not even the fault of the recipient, the person listening. Maybe they're just not in a space where they're able to comprehend it or digest it, or maybe just it's something as simple as the word choice we use could be slightly different, and it'll hook somewhere in the brain differently. And so, like, to be able to communicate the same message in multiple formats and not feel like our worth or our sense of satisfaction or our success or failure is incumbent upon how transformative the experience is for our people in a short window of time. Sometimes we have to play long game and go like, it goes out to here, instead of just thinking like, this short window of class, I need to see the change in them then. So it's there's a lot there.
Yeah.
And I think about that with kids, right? Like,
Yes.
so with my kids, like my son, you know, I bring up my son because he's a little older now, 19. And some of the things that he says, I'm like, for real, dude? Like, I told you that how many, like, that's a decade ago I mentioned that to you, and you're just now getting it? And I have to realize that he's building up the framework of knowledge, like a foundation of knowledge. And in his younger years, he may not have had enough bricks in that foundation to be able to support the concept that I'm trying to lay on him. But as he has time and opportunity and ease and support to widen that foundation and solidify that foundation, then the stuff that he may vaguely recall me laying on him back then suddenly becomes a lot more easily digested and incorporated into his building, so to speak.
Yeah, that's where Oscar was saying, as especially in their youth, it's so important to expose to different ideas, different exercises, different things. And that, to me, is almost like you've just planted a seed, and it just depends how which seed you're going to nourish and put more effort in for that tree to grow, because there's so many opportunity for young people. But it just depends when it decides to sprout and what ignites it, what would be the catalyst. And kind of going back to as a teacher and being that repetitive messenger and having the humility and knowing that you don't have to be the one to deliver the final message, because sometimes, especially at the temple, we're working as a unit. It's not like, even though I'm the main instructor at the school, I'm the Sifu of the school, that's my school. If one of my junior assistants gets through to the 5-year-old in the little mantis class and I couldn't get through, that's a win for me. And I don't need to be like, well, I'm the oldest instructor here, like I should be the one that is the only one that can get through to all the students. I specifically want to have diverse ages, backgrounds, and different humans, because I know that I can't get through to everybody in the school. It's so important that we have the humility as instructors to know you may not be the one that can actually break through or be the proper communicator for every single person. I mean, and let's just be like super black and white about it. Some of our students come in and English is not their first language.
Right.
Like, we have a lot of Spanish speaking students that literally they're barely learning English because they just started school, and I'm like, all right, Oscar, you're up. Like, it's and if you think about not just as, oh, someone speaks a different language, but it is like that for every single person. You aren't necessarily speaking the same language, and it's very important that all instructors, especially young instructors, know, like, yeah, this is also a team effort, and as long as the student is getting the message and that they are learning what the principles we want them to learn, it's okay that you weren't the one to be this like life changer for that student. It may be the next one or the next one. And I think it's interesting because we are such a school that has this community, and we kind of collaborate in a really open and effective way, or we try to anyway.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different environment that I've seen when you go to a school where there's like just one main dude and that's it, and nobody else is allowed to kind of give any input. Like, it's my word or no word. I think the success of people learning is very, very dependent on having as many inputs in terms of like communicators and people who can speak to those individuals.
Yep, totally. You know, what's interesting too is that, like, if you look at different styles, right? Like some of these styles that are passed down now as if they're like, here's the playbook, thou shalt not veer from this style, right? Actually, a lot of these styles are already syncretic styles. They have multiple influences, like Shotokan, right? Shotokan's actually a blend of 3 styles: Shorei, Shorin, and Judo, right? So, like, you know, Funakoshi Gichin, the founder of Shotokan, was like, his expertise was in 2 different styles of Okinawan martial arts. And then when he got to Japan and became friends with Kano Jigoro, the founder of Judo, he incorporated some of the throws. So, Chole Fat, 3 different styles. You know, you look at so many of the different styles of martial arts, they're not like monolithic.
Yeah. Yep.
Exactly.
Exactly. So, yeah, this has been a really great way to pass the drive time. I could tell you. I mean, maybe we'll just have to podcast every time we're in the car in LA. But yeah, I feel like it's always fascinating to do those deep dives with you, Mark, because you have such a great way of articulating information. So thank you for the combo. Oscar, anything else to add as we are arriving close to our destination, which might mean food time?
It's really nice to be back here just listening to you both speak. The one thing that I'll just add to from my end is I was thinking a lot about the responsibility we have as the teacher, and then the responsibility we have as a student, and how that's all based on, do you believe in the principles that are behind everything? And I don't know if I have the answer, but I was just thinking, wow, the way you guys are describing all this, it just made me think there's a lot of responsibility on both ends, and not that you have to be 100% on all the time, but you have to take accountability of, like, yeah, this is. It's my responsibility as a student, and then it's also my responsibility if I'm in the teaching capacity. So, kudos to both of you smart people.
Oh, please. All right, everybody. Well, this has been fascinating. Apologies for those of you watching on the YouTubes and all that, because I'm sure that this has been a little bit, what is it called? Like
Blair Witch.
Live cam, but really gives you interaction of this, the LA freeway, highway, and all the side streets. But Mark, always a pleasure. I love that he's repping Wallam today, by the way, in his Wallam gear. And I got my Wallam sweatpants on, but I'm definitely not going to be able to show you guys that on camera right now, because that would be really...
That'd be
I'd
different.
have to take off my seatbelt. I'm a very safe passenger. So, all right, Los Angeles, Dr. Mark Cheng, loving the combo. Definitely helped me not get car sick, because I was focused on trying to keep up with the conversation. But until next time, everybody, bye.
Peace.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/Sifu Mimi Chan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram or Facebook.